May I request our moderator, Mr. Shantanu Jaiswal, the head of the India Research BloombergNEF, who's virtually joining us. I would also like to invite Mr. Hemant Limai, the CWG member. Our panelists for the session, Mr. Ashwani Kumar, the Group CEO of Suzlon Group, Mr. Balram Mehta, the Chief Operating Officer, Renewable, Mr. Lars Bondo, Krogsgaard, the CEO-Onshore, Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy. He joins us virtually. In fact, Siemens has recently launched the world's largest wind turbine in Denmark. And Amar Variawa, the Senior Director, Public Affairs and Business Development, Vestas Wind Technology. Mr. Parag Sharma, the founder and CEO, O2 Power. May I request all our speakers to please take center stage. Our moderator, Mr. Shantanu Jaiswal, is joining us virtually, but we also have Mr. Hemant Limai, the CWG member, who's going to be here as the co-moderator, physically present here. Once again, just inviting the speakers, Mr. Ashwani Kumar, Mr. Amar Variawa, Mr. Lars Bondo, Mr. Balram Mehta, Mr. Parag Sharma. And if I can just request our distinguished dignitaries who are just in front of the stage, and any networking, if we can just request you to please have it in the VIP lounge so that we can start without any further challenges and start with our session, please. जो लोग बीच में खड़े हैं, जो मंच के सामने हैं, जो closer to the gates हैं, if I can request you, please take your seats, otherwise we won't be able to start. And these are very important discussions and deliberations which we are having as we are shaping the wind energy sector for our country. As was spoken by respected the Honorable Ambassador, it's not just the business, but it comes with a huge responsibility for each of the stakeholders as we work towards contributing in making sustainable societies. Please take your seats. If I can request people who are standing, ladies and gentlemen, a very humble request for your support so that we can start with our session. Any questions you have, you can please pen down and you can give it to me. We'll look into the time and then accordingly take the questions from the audience. With that, I once again invite our moderator, Mr. Jaiswal, and I think I hand over to him. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank Hemant for being on stage representing me physically over there. And with that, actually, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome you all to the first session the first panel discussion at Windergy 22. It's a real shame that I couldn't be there in person, just looking at so many familiar faces over there and the vibe that is going on. I really want to be there, but I couldn't. And especially for a dedicated wind conference that is happening after a considerable gap. Speaking of which, India's wind sector has endured continuous challenges over the past 4 years, especially with wind auctions seeing low participation by IPPs in 2019 and 2020. The 2.7 gigawatt of new wind auctions conducted in 2021 give comfort to turbine makers and IPPs, but the challenges around project execution, supply chain, and rising costs remain. And those are exactly the things that we're going to cover in today's discussion. In the panel, we have 3 turbine makers and 2 IPPs. And first of all, I would like to start with Lars Bondo, who's joining us directly from Spain. So Lars, welcome to our panel discussion. My first question, to you is that we at BloombergNEF, we are expecting a recovery in the wind business in 2022 and beyond. As the largest seller of wind turbines in the country, what are your expectations of the market in the next 2 to 3 years? This positive sentiment that we have received in the past 1 year, is it going to continue or is it a fluke that is just going to come and go away?
First of all, thank you to the organizers for inviting me to participate in the conference here today. I am indeed talking from our headquarters in Zamudio in northern Spain, close to Bilbao, as you said. So if we look at India, what we see is the potential of 50 to 70 gigawatts of new installations in onshore wind, significant additional volume on offshore wind by 2030. When we look at India, we see ambitious targets when it comes to the buildup of renewable energy in general. And of course, we see the long-term vision of the Indian government to become emission net, or get to emissions net zero by 2070, I believe it is. So there's a lot that will have to happen to support that growth. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, firstly, can India make the pace that is required? To get that, we would have, in onshore wind, we would have to quadruple installations over the coming years to meet the near-term targets. And from my perspective, when I look at the market, I see I have some concerns about that, and allow me to share that. Firstly, I think that in order to meet the growth targets, India will have to improve the speed with which auction volumes are actually built. I mean, you should measure yourselves not auctions, but actually built. We have auction winners that are to achieve the capacity addition was mentioned earlier. Also, when I look at the market, I have to say, from the perspective of wind turbine manufacturing, I'm very concerned about volatility in the supply chain. I think there needs to be in India, as well as in other markets, an acceptance that these kind of radical reduction in tariffs that we have seen will not continue, or certainly not continue at the same pace, because it is a rather, from my perspective, sad fact that almost all, if not all, wind turbine manufacturers are currently losing money in their onshore businesses, which is the sector that will drive the majority of the growth. And also, I think what India would need to do is to open the doors for even more offtake activity in the corporate market. And then what I keep hearing about is that in the context of that we also see challenges in terms of grid access for corporate off-taker. So I think, again, the potential of the market is huge, as the whole industry, but the future is a luxury for those who get there. And I think there are some really big challenges that needs to be resolved in order for all these good intentions to be realized.
Great. Thanks, Lars. Let me bring Ashwani from Suzlon now. So my question to you is, how would you describe the general slowdown in the wind industry in the past, especially the volatility that Lars mentioned? And which policy side factors do you think contributed mostly to the slowdown?
So thanks, Shantanu, and good afternoon to everybody here. I think so. The major change in the wind industry, specifically, if you talk about volumes that have been commissioned year after year, came when there was a change in the way the wind projects were being done for utility purchases. So from a state-specific bid, where the states were trying to organize wind power investment in their state, which was both for their utility purchases as well as for the captive consumers in the state, became a central procurement. Now, of course, there were advantages to central procurement. There was a better security offer to the to the IPPs and the people who set up projects, but it also led to focusing and concentrating the wind power development only in a fewer states than all the windy states that was there. Subsequently, what has also happened is that many of the states put in policies which did not really encourage the captive use by industries for wind power. That also led to, I would say, some of the slowdown in this. But like any other system, the new system is what everybody got used to. Unfortunately, by the time people got used to the new system, the COVID-related aspects hit the wind industry. And as my fellow OEMs will agree, wind is a very complicated, a turbine requires thousands of components coming from various places, and it's a logistics come manufacturing challenge. And it did lead to, I would say, what has been happening at least over the last 1.5 years, lead to some slowdown and some difficulties in putting together these, not only the manufacturing part of it, but also the project related, which probably led to a bigger difference. What I will say is that as we sit here in April 22, most of the problems are behind us. In fact, from the manufacturing point, I think so most of the thing manufacturers have streamlined. It's now all about the project sites and work thereon. And like we did close to 2 gigawatts last year, I would expect much better times in 22, 23 and beyond. And I think so whichever is the policies, and Government of India, of course, encouraging the bigger developers for doing the ISTS, not only for the large projects, but also for captive projects. And all these things are actually, opening up new markets by which large industries in non-windy states can actually set up wind or hybrid power in windy states and take that to fulfill their renewable commitments. So policy-wise, there has been a change. Any change takes little time. The Government of India has been extremely encouraging. In fact, most of the bids that have come out recently are hybrid and wind only, at least at the SECI level. And that would mean that in the new policy, we would see the wind not only reaching the previous heights, but actually surpassing much more than that.
Great. And with that, let's hear something from the IPP side as well, starting with Balram from Renew Power. And again, to quote Ashwani, most of the problems on the manufacturing side are behind us. So my question to you, Balram, is what are the problems that the wind sector is facing on the operational side? And do you foresee any new ones to crop up in the future?
Thank you, Shantanu. I think that is the wrong question, because this question requires at least one day discussion only on this topic. What are the issues we are facing, especially in the operational phase? The plus point is that the issues are same. Whether I joined the sector in 2003, so the issues are same. It's only addition which has happened in the last. But yes, the plus point is we are solving and waiting for the next issues to crop up. The first issue is the resource itself. Especially in wind, we saw the kind of variation which happened in last 2 financial years. Statistically, it was one of the, the probability of happening this event was 1 in 129th year. But yes, it happened. Last year also, the resources were bad, but better than 2021. So that's the first risk, because everybody has made some kind of commitment to investors, and we are falling short of that. And then threat of PPAs, everybody knows, a few states tried, thanks to the central government, the intervention of, the timely intervention of MNRE, central government, at least there is a face saver on that. Curtailment, that's in a few states we are facing that issue. Yes, if it is done in the name of grid safety, I think we agree to that, but then if it is on account of commercial, then it's very, very difficult to digest that, in spite of the fact that we have must-run status. And then the biggest issue, which especially 30 gigawatt of feed-in tariff megawatts are facing, there's around 30 gigawatt, that is the health of DISCOM, which is actually worrisome for everybody. It's a kind of, we are married with those DISCOMs for 25 years. No doubt the marriage was after quite a due diligence, but yes, we are facing issues. The receivable period has in many states it has gone beyond 15 months, and the IPPs are facing issues. So the precious equity which we need to spend on a project for constructing the new projects, we are somehow paying our they're paying back to lenders. So that's another issue which we are facing. And then the new issue which has cropped up is DSM. It's a kind of a new regulation which has cropped up, and suddenly it was like out of blue, and the impact of DSM to operational projects is to the tune of 14 paisa as far as wind is concerned, to 7 paisa to solar. That's again hitting us badly. And the other issue which in operational projects which we are facing is the availability of skilled manpower. I shouldn't say skilled manpower, the availability of the willing manpower. Because this millennial, the yo-man generation, they are not willing to join the wind sector. So we actually, everybody has to work in that direction to ensure that we are able to get skilled and willing manpower. So those are the major issues which especially we are facing on operational projects. Now, one of the options which especially on PPAs, which MNRE was trying, and even Honorable Minister suggested in one of the meetings, that if it is possible to shift those PPAs from state discoms to some central utility, I think that will be of great help to most of the investors. So I think that jointly everybody is to work in that direction. Thank you, Chandra.
Thanks, Balram. We'll come back to on the shifting of PPAs to a central authority. That's an interesting argument that you bring in. But let's hear from Parag a little bit. And Parag, I would like you to give us insight from the financing side, because financing is integral, as important as developing projects or building turbines. So how has the investment climate changed in the wind industry in the past few years? And generally, what are the investors and lenders looking in a wind project when making investment decisions?
Yeah, thanks, Shantanu. So I believe that things have drastically changed over the last 1 or 2 years as far as wind is concerned. Historically, investors were slightly concerned on the wind sector investment on account of two large reasons. One is what is the business case for investing in the wind sector when the solar prices are going down, and people started questioning that is it only to meet RPO that a particular state is buying wind? So one question which was arising was more around the business case. And the second question was more arising around the operating issues. We all know that a lot of IPPs in India were not able to meet even the P75 generation numbers. There was delays in execution. So many SECI PPAs have been signed, but very 1/3 or maybe even smaller portion have been commissioned. So second was more around these operating issues, and that led to some concern in the minds of the investors. But if we look forward, then the business case is becoming more and more stronger for the wind sector. Right now, if you look at the load curve of a distribution licensee, there is, even after the shift of agriculture load to the morning hours, even after that, they might not require too much of a solar. What they are looking for is a solution in the evening hours or in the morning hours. So the business case for wind is becoming more and more stronger. If you see the two developing segments right now in the sector, which is C&I and green hydrogen, both are looking for round-the-clock supply of power, where the quantum of wind would be much higher than what is there for the solar. So the one good thing which is happening for the wind sector and more from the minds of the investors is that business case is becoming much, much stronger for the wind as compared to what it was before. And secondly, on the operating issues, look, now we are having much quality of data on the basis of which we do WRA. Now we have execution in the hands of IPPs who know that what is the long-term value of a wind power plant, and they execute it in that fashion. We now know that in the wind business, there are only 4 or 5 large wind turbine manufacturers left, which are of global scale, and there should not be any concern on the technology or the quality of the wind turbine. So with all these changes, I strongly believe that it will give a lot of comfort to both the equity investor and the lenders in the industry. Thanks, Shantanu.
Thanks, Parag. My next question is from for our speaker from Vestas. And while the business case for wind is getting stronger, globally the wind industry is a very competitive one. So competitive that, as Lars mentioned, none of the manufacturers are making profits. And if you come back home in India, power off-takers want an ever-decreasing tariff, whereas manufacturers are pressed in the middle of that and the volatile commodity and energy markets. So how do we reconcile these contradictions in the extremes of the value chain?
Good question, Shantanu. Well, by the way, I'm replacing here Purvin Patel, who is our president for APAC region. Due to some conflict in his meeting timing, he could not join here personally. So your question is very valid. If you see, the condition of India today, so we have to divide the whole situation into three parts. Number one is that, we have to take the long shot, okay, long-term strategy. As our Honorable Prime Minister also has set up a very ambitious target for next 10 years, 500 gigawatt of renewable energy deployment by 2030, and out of which 140 gigawatt is for wind. So take a long shot. Okay, this is actually a very solid business case for every player, whether it's a national, international, the OEMs, IPP, or the utility, or even the component manufacturers. But having said that, okay, you also need to consider the midterm and a short-term view of the overall situation. There are challenges that we all have acknowledged, and the last 2-3 years, due to COVID pandemic situation, the challenges were multiplied. And because of that, we have seen the impact on manufacturing operations, we have seen the impact on the commissioning activity, and we have seen the impact on even movement of the equipments, machines, and last but not the least, impact on the the raw material prices. This is a very, very critical situation that we are in. All I can say is that most of the OEMs have access to the technology today. They have access to the innovation and the next level of the ideas of how to make wind a solid business case. But now they have to take a pause, and they have to actually think like a startup. They have to think like in a very agile way, that how to navigate here from this situation successfully to ensure that next couple of years, whatever capacity we have built in the country, that can be utilized. For example, in the country, putting all OEM together, the combined manufacturing or production capacity is around 10 to 12 gigawatt. And today, if you see, in last 5 years, there is hardly 5 gigawatt of volume has been commissioned. Now we can imagine, last year commission volume was only 800 megawatt or maybe 1000 megawatt. Having 12 gigawatt of capacity, production capacity, and only 1 gigawatt has been commissioned, this is also putting a lot of pressure on manufacturers, the component manufacturers. Because at the end of the day, we cannot stop manufacturing. We have to keep our manufacturing line alive. We have to ensure that our people are coming to factory and producing on a daily basis. So as I said, this is a really critical phase. But wind industry has completed 30 plus years in the country, and we have come across many such situations in the past. So there's definitely a bright future. As I said, we have to take a long shot. Looking at the current situation, I can only say that I think worst part is over. Whatever we have seen in last couple of years, I think from here, we can reconcile the current situation, and we can move only in one direction, and that is the upward direction. So I'm very hopeful that in the time to come, things will be coming on track with manufacturers, with component manufacturers, and with the capacity commissioning on ground at the end of the day. Thank you.
Right. And you mentioned a very important point that manufacturers, they have a manufacturing capacity of 12 to 15 gigawatts, whereas the overall size of the market is less than a third of that, the annual market size. And that is something to be looked upon. So my next question is to Ashwani. And, Ashwani, again, as Amar said, that the wind industry has had several close calls in the past, but they were always able to pull themselves together. And together, OEMs in India, especially led by Suzlon in the past, have developed the wind market as well in India. So, what are the market development priorities or considerations for OEMs now? And if you could tell us the things that you are doing to ensure that we do not encounter another spell of slowdown in annual installations as we have seen since 2018.
So, thanks, Shantanu. I think so. It's an important question, but I think so. The little bit on the environment, which is changed, and we have to acknowledge that. So earlier, if you take 10 years ago or even earlier than that, the whole of wind market was led by OEMs. So OEMs used to actually build, install the project itself, and then go for selling it. So from where you have a ready-made product to sell, we have come a long way, while which actually we don't even know whom we will sell to, because he has to win an auction which will be conducted by somebody for a consumer, which is a discom, which is still not signed the PPA at the time of all these things happening. So the dynamics of the market has, especially for the larger volumes, has changed completely. However, the most important thing that remains is that the manufacturers, OEMs, still have the capabilities not only to manufacture, but actually to install, commission, and operate these projects. So given their, I would say, experience of multi-decades, their experience of actually operating in the ground, which is again much more than most of the IPPs, since IPP is a much newer phenomena, has to be taken into account. And if we allocate, let's say, some sort of a wind parks, like we did for solar parks a few years back, and allotted them to various OEMs or OEMs in partnerships with IPP developers, then what that will do is it will have a ready set of prepared sites, if not prepared projects, ready to get installed. And unless we do, and it reminds me of something which was done almost 15 years back on thermal side. So thermal side, the government of India did acquire land, did the coal linkage and everything else, and then put out the projects for bidding. And what that led to was almost a revolution in thermal capacity, and what was being done in 5 years got installed almost year after year for the next 4 or 5 years. And that there will be never a thermal project shortage in the country near future. The same thing, I think, so if we need to target 140 gigawatts, needs to be developed. So we need to take care of that, the so-called planning period for a wind project and shorten that, because what will also happen if you shorten that period is you removing the risk. Today, all the raw material price risk or others which are coming either on an OEM or on an IPP customer that we supply to, all that will vanish if the time period is not 18 months, but is reduced to more like 3 to 6 months. And that can only be done if we have prepared sites, if we have prepared evacuation infrastructure, if we have, worked around all the states, because no matter what we try to do, we cannot have all the installation coming in only in one state or two states, which are the highest wind level sites. So we have to say, okay, Andhra Pradesh has this much potential. It might not be, I would say, as good a tariff as Gujarat or Tamil Nadu will give, but we need to develop that if we have to do 140 gigawatts. So prepare all those sites in a, I would say, wind park sort of a model, along with OEMs, along with IPP developers, and that would make a lot of uncertainties to go away. So that is one part. The second part, which has already started in reviving the sector, is this ISTS on captive large customers. And I think so if RPO obligations on them are increased further, especially on the large electricity consuming industries, then that will give another big boost to the renewable market in India. So presently, most of them have their own captive either coal-based or some petroleum products-based plants, and they would themselves love to shift to renewable. They may not be located in a windy state, they may be located elsewhere, which are farther away from the wind site or solar site, but hybrid model to them, facilitated by what Government of India has done. Now the same thing has to percolate down to the states level, because all of them are actually a customer of a state discom. All of them will, while the power grid or the POSOCO will do the transmission lines interstate, the generating state as well as the consuming state has to make policies in line with the Government of India intentions and Government of India's the ISTS policies, which will make that market to grow. And I agree with my fellow speaker from Vestas that manufacturing capacity is there. So for us to ramp up is not going to take time. And if the policies are in place along with our IPP and large customers, we can easily start doing 10, 12, 20, 15 gigawatts per year installation in India.
Thanks, Ashwani. That's quite encouraging. Lars, bringing you back into the discussion. So we heard Ashwani saying that the dynamics of the markets have changed. So keeping that in mind, are there any lessons from other wind markets that can be adopted in India to increase the annual wind installations in the country?
I think there are a couple of things happening around the world that are also of interest to India, because it is a global market where India is essentially competing for some of the same capacity that could also go to other markets. And what we're seeing, for example, in Europe now is that in addition to the discussion around an energy transition fueled by green electricity, we are also now having a real and serious discussion about energy independence from gas. And that will mean, and that is crystal clear, it will mean a boost of volumes in other markets, and it will mean, not in the very short term, but in the midterm, that there will be a real pressure on capacities. And I think in that context, it is important to come back to my point from before. It is important that there is an understanding in India that we cannot just continue this constant reduction in prices. And again, you can discuss whether claims have gone up and down a little bit recently. But I think in the longer term, governments, regulators have to accept that there's a price to what we're doing. We have to make money on the business we do. And as I said, or almost all of the wind turbine manufacturers are not making money, and certainly not on the, if you isolate the onshore business, which is the largest part of the industry. What is important for us when we look at India is, of course, this element of stability in terms of volumes that has also been addressed by the other speakers here, right? It is really important that we see an outlook in terms of stable installations every year, not a lot of volatility. That is important for us. I think if we get that in place, if we are realistic about the cost of wind energy, which even at a somewhat higher level would still be much better than the alternative, new coal and new gas, and then I think there's a really interesting future for us. But these things have to be addressed and dealt with. I think also one thing, if you allow me, that I feel particularly. I feel is particularly important right now is we are really battling, and the speaker from Vestas mentioned that we are really battling volatility in the supply chain in terms of availability of components and what have you. And one of the things I think where offtake can help us, and India could potentially help us, is to implement into the offtake arrangement flexibility to cater for cost volatility in our supply chains. So that raw material volatility, for example, could be reflected in offtake prices. I absolutely think that is possible. We have seen it in some countries before, and I think we are on the verge, at least when I talk to European regulators, politicians. I think we're going to see something similar in certain markets. It could also be stuff like giving grace to our customers in India when it comes to of the offtake, simply to cater for the uncertain supply chain. We are really on some in some aspects dealing with volatility that, if not on a weekly, then at least monthly basis, can impact our business. And somehow for markets to integrate into the way you think about offtake would be a great help to the industry.
Right. Thanks, Lars. That's plenty of food for thought over there. But let me bring back Balram and Parag back into the discussion, starting with Balram. So, Balram, how do we go about making wind the poster boy of renewables industry once again from where we are right now? And more specifically, what can be done to create more demand for wind power in our power sector?
Thank you, Shantanu. say we have to ensure that we come out, especially the SECI or NTPC or the procurement agencies, they come out with some innovative bids. And the beautiful combination will be wind, solar and battery up to a certain extent. And the kind of negativity which was associated with renewable power, a kind of infirmity, I think we can now, depending on the location, the kind of dispersion, whatever we have across the states, we can come out with a very beautiful combination of wind, solar and battery, and we can provide RTC solution. The first bid which Renew has won of RTC, which will add to like 400 megawatt of wind is 400 megawatt of RTC bid is adding 900 megawatt of wind. So that's the kind of innovative bids we need to bring in, which gives importance to wind and the kind of advantage we have with the wind. The second is, say, as on date, we are not able to execute projects, or OEM is not able to sell the machine because of the tariff. The kind of, like mentally we have like given a picture that tariff has to be below 3 rupees, which is not actually the right tariff, looking into the current price, the current issues at site. So we have to ensure that the due weightage is given to the green component, and even if somebody has to spend 15-20 paisa more for procurement, somebody is ready to spend that. That will surely bring wind megawatts back. And then the third point from my side will be, we should, like, the 30 gigawatt has been added by small investors across the country, and especially in the southern states. So if you see in the last 3-4 years, the small investor is not active because there is no opportunity for small investors to invest and add megawatts, especially in wind. So somehow we have to come out with an options, maybe a kind of wind farm concept, where some either OEM or IPP is developing, and all small IPPs are small investors are part to that. We have to bring that community back to the wind sector. I think that will add megawatts. Repowering is another which will add megawatts as well as green units. And if you see the most of the sites in India, the good sites, the PLF as on date is 7-8%. So we have to bring those sites back and repower those. For that, we are looking for a policy where we have to ensure that the current revenue, we are able to ensure that they get their current revenue, and over and above that, that can be through feed-in tariff, that can be through auction. So we have to come up with some innovative mechanism for repowering. And hydrogen, I am sure the wind will play a major role in hydrogen, green hydrogen / green ammonia. The concept is still building up, but I am sure wind will play a role in that. And finally, on offshore, in the morning also we had discussion on it. It's an important topic, and especially we actively started in it around 3 years back, and certainly there was no action, and again we have started. So we have to bring that kind of momentum we have to bring back. If we miss this time, I think then the foreign entities will not be interested in India's offshore sector as such. So whether MNRE or IPPs or manufacturer, we have to see that this momentum, we keep this momentum, we come out with the offshore policy. I think with all this, I'm sure there will be a good addition as far as wind is concerned.
Thanks, Balram. So Parag, I mean, we heard quite a number of good solutions, from the case one bidding to RTC, bringing back small investors, repowering and offshore. But I want to focus on hybrid technology grids that we have been hearing all morning. And I do believe that hybrid projects that use a combination of wind, solar, and energy storage can help renewables deliver dispatchable power, which will help us compete head-on with coal power plants. So I have a two-part question for you. First of all, what do you think needs to be done to ensure that renewable sector is ready for developing large-scale hybrid projects? And secondly, are there any potential upsides of building hybrids that could benefit the wind industry?
Yeah, thanks, Shantanu. So I believe that market reforms is what will solve this problem largely. And what I mean by market reforms, first, the GNA should be implemented as soon as possible. The second, the ancillary services market, which is implemented in a very small scale in India. So its scope has to be expanded to states, and it should be implemented in a larger way. The third, to really make it easier for the renewable industry to make power firm, limited amount of banking has to be provided by the states. So once we do these three things, I'm pretty sure that the two large markets will get open for the wind and for the renewables in large. One is the C&I market, and second is the green hydrogen market. Just to give an example on numbers, India is talking about replacing 5 million tons of green hydrogen per annum. So which even 1 million tons require 20 gigawatts. So that itself is a bigger volume. So we require almost 120, 130 gigawatt of renewables by 2030 to meet that. Similarly, on the C&I, even a middle scale industry requires 30 megawatt of round the clock power, which will take around 120, 130 gigawatt of renewables. So if we solve these open access related issues, which I just mentioned, it will largely open up a big space for renewable sector. People will install wind and the solar plants at the good radiation and the good wind resource areas. Interstate transmission charges have already been waived. And once we have a GNA issue solved, once we have a ancillary services market issue solved, and why this? Because that will make it dispatchable, then we can largely cater to the C&I segment. So I believe this is one element of the entire piece which government resolves will really open up the wind sector. The second is obviously the other angle which Secretary Sir was also mentioning in the morning session, which is how we can make the wind bids more effective. Right now, everything is open in the sense that in every bid you can install capacities across the state. It might be good from the point of view that you are getting a good tariff, but it leads to a lot of problems in execution. Everybody is lining up in one or two substations in Karnataka or one or two other states, not leading to an overall comprehensive development of the wind sector. So that is a second leg where already a report has been prepared by MNRE. It is under discussion in limited groups, and it has 6 or 7 good suggestions where we can improve the kind of bidding which is currently happening. So if both these things happen, one on the C&I side, one on the utility segment side, wind will have a great potential.
Thank you. My next question is to Amar. So Amar, again, taking a look at some of the long-term initiatives that we have planned, India needs to develop 140 gigawatts of projects till 2030. We have a much broader goal of achieving net zero emissions by 2070. So where in the value chain are there opportunities for the Indian wind industry when we speak of such long-term targets for us?
It's a good question. So Shantanu, I can tell you, let's do a simple mathematics. The wind installation target by 2030 is 140 gigawatt, of which 30 is offshore and 110 is onshore. Now out of this 140 gigawatt, we have already seen the commission of 40 gigawatt. So remaining 100 gigawatt we need to install in next 8 years. But I'll also add 20 more gigawatt into it, and that will be probably coming from repowering channel. Because repowering, by now I think, out of total 40 gigawatt installed capacity, 20 gigawatt is such that, which has completed 20 years of design life cycle. So, probably in the time to come, we have to replace that also with the more advanced and efficient turbines. So 100 plus 20, 120 gigawatt could be the target by 2030, and we have only 8 years in hand. So roughly 15 gigawatt per year commissioning is is a business case, and that's a very solid business case. You have, if you want to achieve that target by 2030, you have to commission at least 15 gigawatt per year. And if you have such a big target, I was just thinking that which are the other countries in the world who have such a massive target. So first of all, I'm very happy that at least we have a political will, we have ambitious target, we have at least the narratives and the environment which is more conducive, more inclusive. But this kind of opportunity also comes with a lot of challenges. And there are some suggestions also for that. I would like to, mention them, a couple of them. See, number one challenge for any manufacturer, whether it's OEM or a component manufacturer, today the challenge is in terms of import duty exemption, which is probably, the government is trying to rationalize in form of CCDC. So when you're trying to bring new technology, which is suitable from now to next, 20 years, okay, from day when the supply chain is not ready in the country. So you have to import the turbine, or at least some of the components of the turbine. And the CCDC rationalization is happening, so probably, we will not be able to, bring the latest technology in time in this part of the world, at least till the time the supply chain is developed. Second, with the ROTTEP scheme, we have seen that, the export is also not very competitive. So the import benefit is getting minimized, export benefit is also getting minimized. The third point is GST. You might have seen that, the rates for, the renewable energy devices have increased, from 5 to 12%. And also, there's a different rate for service. So I think, these kind of taxes and duties are actually creating short-term challenges for achieving the long-term goal. And last but not the least is that, we also need to think about PLI. See, PLI, there is a group of people, in ministry or, in the industry, they also talk about that, okay, you have a 12 gigawatt of manufacturing capacity. So why do you need PLI? My viewpoint is very clear here that whatever 12 gigawatt so-called wind manufacturing production capacity we have today, it is 2 megawatt platform. And India is at the tipping point. From now onward, we are all actually migrating into 3 megawatt platform, 4 megawatt platform, and we are also talking about offshore wind, which probably 5 or 6 megawatt, platform turbines. In order to bring this technology in the country, we all need to do a capacity expansion. We all need to do facility expansion, not only at the OEM, but at the component manufacturer level also. So they need to be incentivized. So these are the, the challenges that, will be also coming with the opportunity. Last but not the least, actually Balram put it in a very nice way, that tariff is the biggest hindrance today. See, out of 12 gigawatt of manufacturing capacity, if you are only commissioning 800 megawatt, one of the reasons for that could be probably, the entire business case is not viable for the value chain. And, if we can think about the floor price in the, the upcoming auction, where probably, floor price of 3 rupees or 3 rupees 20 paisa, nobody will be allowed to, bid below that. Then probably, that would be a new dimension into the entire auctioning process, and that will open up more states. Today, because of the tariff, discovered tariff is such that, we are all witnessing the, the capacities getting concentrated in only Gujarat or in Tamil Nadu. But if imagine the tariff is, floor price of, tariff is 3 rupees or 3 rupees 20 paisa, probably more states will be opening up. Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and so on and so forth. I think we will see more and more, the windy state level expansion of the wind, and that will create more opportunity. However, this wind floor price tariff, will also come with some kind of, guarantee that, the developers have to commission the capacity in 12 to 18 months. So I think these are some of the, the areas which
Thanks,
are
Amar. I mean, those are
strategy.
really great suggestions and problems that you highlighted. I think we may have to take a few questions from the audience as well. For that, Himkant, could you please confirm, do we have the time for that? And could you help me facilitate that, please? Please let me know if there are no audience questions. I have more.
I think probably we can take 2 questions.
Ramesh from the Business Line newspaper from Chennai. It's a quick question to developers. We heard in the morning Mr. Naik of Karnataka say that how Karnataka is a big player in the markets, GTAM markets. Would you consider putting up merchant capacities? Is it a good time to do it now?
I think slowly we had to decrease our dependence on the central procurement agency or state procurement agencies. And like there are many IPPs, including Renew, which are setting up the merchant capacity. And just for information, the few projects which Finally, there was some issue in PPA, the states were not ready to procure, were ready to take that power. We are selling into merchant, and thanks to the scarcity, we are getting a very good rate, much better than. That is further strengthening the thought that now is a time to go for merchant capacity.
I would only like to add that between solar and wind, if someone has to set up a merchant capacity, wind is making more sense than solar. That is very clear. And then rest depends upon the risk appetite of a solar IPP, how much merchant you want to go.
Think then I don't, oh, there is one, no? There are no more questions. So let's conclude this session. Shantanu, thank you very much for a very good virtual moderation, which is sign of times that we live. But thank you very much for your attention. And back to MC.
Yeah, thank you to all our speakers, also virtually. May I request Mr. Limai to kindly present the mementos, a token of our gratitude, appreciation to our speakers. Thanking Mr. Jaiswal also, who moderated the session virtually, and the virtual speakers also. Thank you to Mr. Ashwani Kumar, thanking Mr. Amar, thanking Mr. Balram Mehta, Mr. Parag Sharma, and thank you to Mr. Lars who joined us virtually. May I request now Mr. Divigiri to kindly present the memento to our co-moderator here. Thanking Mr. Limai. Thank you. Thanking all of you.